Hello and welcome. Wherever you are right now, whatever kind of day you have had, I am glad you are here. Close your eyes if you would like, or let them grow heavy on their own. We are going to go somewhere very far away tonight. Somewhere so far that the distance itself becomes a kind of comfort. Somewhere quiet in a way that nothing on earth is ever quite quiet. Let your breathing slow. Let the sounds around you soften. And come with me. Come to Mars. It is night here, or what passes for night. The sun has set behind Olympus Mons, the largest volcano in the solar system, 3 times the height of Everest, and the sky has turned a color that has no exact name in any language spoken on Earth. It is not black, not quite. It has a depth to it, a bruised redness that lingers after sunset like the memory of the day, like the last warmth fading from a stone. The stars are coming out now, sharper and more numerous than you have ever seen them from the surface of another world, because there is almost no atmosphere to scatter their light. They do not twinkle here. They burn steady and cold, like small holes in the dark through which something immeasurably distant is leaking through. I am lying in my bunk inside the habitat. The habitat is a module about the size of a large camper van, though to call it that feels inadequate, because it is everything. It is my kitchen and my laboratory and my bedroom and my entire world for the foreseeable future. The walls are curved white composite panels, designed to be efficient rather than beautiful, and they have become beautiful to me anyway through sheer familiarity, the way a plain room becomes beloved when you have spent enough time in it. The air in here smells like nothing you would recognize. It is clean in a way that real air is never clean, filtered and recycled and scrubbed of everything except the molecules you need. Sometimes I miss the smell of rain. Sometimes I miss the smell of grass. Sometimes I wake in the night and the absence of those smells tells me immediately, before I've even opened my eyes, exactly where I am. But tonight, I am not reaching for anything I do not have. Tonight, I am simply here, and here is enough. And I want to tell you about it. Outside the habitat window, and there is a small window about the size of a hardcover book, double-paned and scratched at the edges from dust. The Martian landscape is doing what it always does at night. Settling. That is the only word for it. The wind that blows during the day, thin and cold and carrying fine red dust in long horizontal curtains, has gentled into something barely there. The dust is settling from the air, drifting down through the dark in particles so fine they are almost nothing, coating everything in another imperceptible layer of the same rust red that covers every surface on this planet in every direction, as far as any eye has ever seen. The temperature outside right now is approximately minus 60 degrees Celsius. I know this without checking because the habitat's external sensors have been speaking to me in numbers for so long that the numbers have become a kind of language, a weather report from a world that has its own logic and its own seasons and its own patient indifference to whether I find it hospitable or not. Minus 60. And yet here, inside, it is exactly 20 degrees. The heating system runs quietly, a low hum that has become as unnoticeable as a heartbeat. I am warm. I am breathing. Outside is impossible, and inside is home. And the distance between those two things is about 30 centimeters of composite wall. I find that thought strangely comforting rather than frightening at this hour. The thinness of the boundary. The fact that the impossible is so close, and that what stands between me and it is simply engineering, simply the careful accumulated work of thousands of people over decades, all of it expressing itself as warmth and breathable air, and the ability to lie in a bunk and look at the scratched window and watch the dark. Let me tell you about the dark here. On Earth, night is never truly dark. There are always lights somewhere. A city glow on the horizon, a street lamp down the road, the blue pulse of a phone screen in another room. Even in the most remote wilderness on Earth, there is almost always something. The bioluminescence of the ocean, the slow amber glow of a distant town, the eyes of animals reflecting in the dark. Here there is nothing. When I turn off the habitat lights, which I have done tonight, the dark is absolute except for the stars and the faint glow of instrument panels that I've dimmed to nearly nothing. The dark presses against the window from outside with a completeness that I felt, the first time I experienced it, as a kind of physical weight. It took several nights before I stopped feeling that weight and started feeling something else instead. Something that I can only describe as privacy. The most complete privacy I have ever known. No one is watching. No satellite can see me in this dark. No camera, no eye, no awareness of any kind can reach through that window and find me here. I am the only person on an entire planet, and the planet is very large, and the dark is very complete. And in that darkness I am, for the first time in my life, genuinely, absolutely alone. I know that might sound like it should be frightening. And sometimes, on other nights, at other hours, it is something close to that. But tonight, it is not frightening. Tonight, it is the most restful thing I can imagine. The aloneness has a texture to it, a quality of silence that I've been trying to find words for since I arrived here. And the closest I can come is this. It feels like being the last person in a library after closing time. All the books still there. All the knowledge still there. The whole accumulated weight of everything that has been thought and written and discovered still present in the room. But no noise. No obligation. No one needing anything. Just you and the shelves and the particular quality of silence that belongs to rooms full of books. That is what Mars feels like at night, from inside this small white room, with the instrument panels glowing faintly and the window showing me a darkness full of stars. The Milky Way is directly overhead right now. I cannot see it through the window. The window is too small and faces east rather than up. But I know it is there because I checked the sky map before I came to bed, and I calculated its position as I always do. A small ritual that grounds me in the larger geometry of where I am. The Milky Way from here looks, I am told, almost the same as from Earth. The same broad river of light. The same dark rifts where dust clouds block the stars behind them. The same ancient, impersonal beauty that human beings have been looking up at since before they had words for what they were seeing. From here, if you could look at exactly the right spot in that river of light, you would find a small and not particularly remarkable star. And around that star, third from it at a distance that light takes 8 minutes to cross, is a blue and white sphere turning slowly in the dark. And on that sphere, right now, it is some particular time in some particular place, and people are sleeping or waking, eating or arguing, falling in love or falling apart, doing all the things that people do on a planet that has enough atmosphere to hold weather, and enough water to hold oceans, and enough warmth to hold life without any help from anyone. I think about that sphere often, less desperately than I used to. More the way you think about a home you have left deliberately, knowing you will return, carrying it with you not as a wound, but as a warmth. The Martian night is 24 hours and 37 minutes long. Or rather, the Martian day is that long, which means the cycle of light and dark that I've been adjusting to since I arrived here runs on a schedule that is almost but not quite the same as the one my body was built for. Almost. That almost is the interesting part. My internal clock drifts slightly each day, nudged forward by those extra 37 minutes, and I have learned to work with the drift rather than against it, to let my sleep come a little later each night, and my waking come a little later each morning, following the slow pull of a planet that is not quite the one I came from. There is something meditative about that drift, the way it reminds me every single day that I am not on Earth. Not a dramatic reminder, not a frightening one, just a quiet daily acknowledgement. You are somewhere else. The clocks here are different. The days here are different. You are living at a different rhythm now, and the rhythm is not wrong. It is simply Martian, and you are learning to be Martian in your bones. Outside, the wind has picked up slightly. I can hear it against the outer wall of the habitat, a sound so faint it is almost not a sound at all. A whisper, a suggestion. The atmosphere here is about 1% of Earth's atmospheric pressure, which means the wind, even when it blows fast, carries very little force. A Martian windstorm that would send red dust swirling across the plains for weeks would be, if you stepped into it, about as forceful against your skin as a very gentle breeze on a warm day. The violence of it is optical rather than physical. It looks dramatic from inside because the dust turns the air a darker red and the visibility drops. But the actual pressure of it against the habitat walls is negligible. I find this endlessly interesting. A storm that looks like the end of the world and feels like nothing. There is probably a metaphor in there somewhere, but at this hour I am not reaching for metaphors. At this hour I am simply listening to the whisper of a thin atmosphere carrying fine red dust across a cold, dark plain, and finding it, against all reasonable expectation, soothing. Let me tell you about the dust. Martian dust is extraordinary stuff. It is finer than talcum powder, fine enough to stay suspended in the air for weeks after a storm lifts it, fine enough to coat every surface it touches in a layer so thin you cannot see it accumulating, but can see it when it is suddenly gone. The way you notice dust on furniture only when something moves and disturbs it. It is iron oxide, rust, the same stuff that gives old metal its orange-red color. The entire surface of this planet is rust. Billions of years ago, Mars had a magnetic field and a thicker atmosphere and possibly even liquid water on its surface. And in that ancient time, there was iron and there was oxygen, and the two combined, slowly and then completely. And when the magnetic field died and the atmosphere thinned and the water was lost, what remained was a planet entirely covered in the product of that ancient oxidation. I am sleeping on rust. I am breathing recycled air on a planet made of rust. The red I see through my window every morning when the sun rises and turns the dust-hazed sky from black to its particular shade of pale salmon pink. That red is the color of a planet that once had something and lost it. And yet, it is beautiful. I have not stopped finding it beautiful, which surprises me still. I expected, after the first weeks, to become accustomed to it in the way you become accustomed to any landscape, to stop seeing it properly, to have it become merely background. That has not happened. Every morning when the light changes and the plains outside the habitat come into focus, the scattered rocks, the low rim of a distant crater, the smooth curves of wind-sculpted sand in the low places, I find myself still looking at it with something that feels like wonder. It is a world, a whole world, older than anything human beings have ever touched, older by billions of years than the oldest stone ever quarried on Earth. And it has been here all along, turning slowly around the sun in its longer orbit, through all of human history and before human history, patient and red and completely indifferent. And now I am here, and I am the first, and I am looking at it through a scratched, double-paned window, and I cannot quite believe any of it is real. Phobos is rising now. I know this without looking because I know the schedule. Phobos, the inner and larger of Mars's two moons, rises in the west and sets in the east because it orbits so fast that it overtakes the planet's rotation. It circles Mars in 7 hours and 39 minutes, which means it rises and sets twice in a single Martian day, and it moves fast enough to actually watch, to see it moving against the stars if you look at it for long enough. It is not a ball of rock like our moon. It is a lumpy, irregular thing, shaped something like a potato, only about 22 kilometers across, covered in craters, including one enormous one called Stickney, that is so large relative to Phobos itself that the impact that created it must have come very close to shattering the moon entirely. Phobos is slowly spiraling inward. Every century it moves about 2 meters closer to Mars, pulled by tidal forces, and in about 30 to 50 million years, it will either break apart from those same forces and become a ring around Mars, or it will fall and crater the surface in a final catastrophic collision. Either way, 30 to 50 million years from now, the sky above Mars will look different than it does tonight. Tonight it is there, small and fast-moving, paler than our moon, reflecting sunlight with the efficiency of dark rock. I cannot see it from where I am lying, but I know it is there. And knowing it is there is enough. Knowing the names of things, knowing their schedules, their distances, their histories. This has been one of the great consolations of this place. Knowledge as company. The facts of things as a kind of companionship. Deimos is out there too, the smaller outer moon, so small and so far that from the surface of Mars it looks like nothing so much as a slightly too bright star. It moves so slowly against the sky that it is nearly impossible to distinguish from actual stars by casual observation. Ancient astronomers on Earth, had they somehow been transported to the surface of Mars, might never have identified Deimos as a moon at all. It would simply have been a star that behaved oddly, that rose and set on a slightly different schedule from the rest. A small irregularity in the sky that might take years of careful observation to explain. I think about those ancient astronomers sometimes. The ones who looked up at the night sky from a dark hillside somewhere in what is now Greece or Mesopotamia or China and tried to make sense of what they were seeing. They had none of the tools I have. They had no idea, most of them, that the points of light they were watching were other worlds. They mapped what they could see and named what they mapped and built entire cosmologies from incomplete data and still managed, through sheer patient intelligence, to understand things about the movement of celestial bodies that remain correct today. One of them, a man named Kepler who lived in the early 17th century, predicted that Mars must have 2 moons. He predicted this not from any evidence, but from a symmetry argument, a feeling that since Earth had 1 moon and Jupiter had 4, Mars, which was between them, ought logically to have 2. He was right. He was right for entirely the wrong reasons, but the conclusion was correct, and Phobos and Deimos were discovered more than 200 years after his death by an astronomer named Asaph Hall, who was specifically looking for them because Kepler had predicted they should be there. I find something deeply reassuring in that story. The idea that reasoning from incomplete information, from pattern and intuition, and the instinct that the universe has a kind of internal logic, can still arrive at correct conclusions, that the guesses of a careful mind are worth making even when they cannot be verified. That prediction and patience and the willingness to look for what you believe should be there can sometimes find it. I am getting sleepy now. I can feel it at the edges of my thoughts, the way thinking about one thing slides into thinking about something only loosely related, the way the connections between ideas become softer and less precise, the way I am happy to follow a thought wherever it wants to go rather than directing it. This is the good kind of sleepiness, the kind that comes after a long day of work, after your body has done what it came here to do, and your mind has processed what it needed to process, and what remains is simply the settling, the slow decompression. I work today in the Geological Survey area about 3 kilometers from the habitat. I drove there in the rover, which is a small pressurized vehicle about the size of a large SUV, and I spent 8 hours taking core samples from a rock formation that may or may not contain evidence of ancient microbial life. This is what I do here. I look for evidence of things that may have lived on this planet billions of years ago, when it was warmer and wetter and had a thicker sky, when it was more like Earth than it is now, when the conditions that we associate with life were briefly, imperfectly present. I have not found anything yet. I do not expect to find anything tomorrow either. The search is patient work, methodical and unglamorous, the kind of science that looks nothing like the science in films and everything like actual science, which is mostly careful data collection and record keeping and the slow accumulation of negative results that gradually narrow the space in which positive results might eventually be found. But the rock formation I was working in today was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with its scientific significance. The layers of sediment compressed over millions of years into something hard and dark and striated with thin lines of different minerals, each line a different period of Martian history, a different chapter in the story of a planet changing slowly through time. I ran my gloved finger along one of those lines and thought about what was happening on Earth when that layer was laid down, what life was doing, what the oceans were full of. How many millions of years of evolution were being quietly conducted while this line of slightly different minerals was being deposited at the bottom of a Martian sea or lake or river in conditions no human mind had ever imagined. That is the thought that humbles me most consistently here. The scale of time, the incomprehensible depth of it. When I try to hold in my mind the idea of billions of years, I cannot do it. Not really. Not the way I can hold the idea of a decade or a century. Billions of years is beyond the scale at which human cognition operates comfortably. We understand it abstractly, the way we understand the distance to a far star, as a number that we can write and calculate with but cannot feel. And yet the evidence of it is everywhere I look here, written in the rock in a language I am learning to read one thin line at a time. The core samples are in the habitat storage section now, labeled and logged and waiting for more detailed analysis. Tomorrow I will look at them more closely. Tonight I am not thinking about them. Tonight I am letting the work rest in its place and giving my mind the space to move where it wants. It wants to move to the sky. I cannot see much of the sky from my bunk, just the small square of window showing me a dark rectangle of star-filled nothing. But I have spent enough hours outside in the Martian day and night to carry the sky with me even when I cannot see it. The way it goes from black to a pale greenish blue at the horizon just before dawn, the colors moving through the sequence in reverse at sunset. The way the dust in the atmosphere catches and scatters the long red wavelengths and occasionally turns a sunset rust, orange, or even a pale pink that looks nothing like any sunset I ever saw on Earth and everything like itself, specific and alien and startlingly lovely. Sunrise on Mars happens quietly. There's no sudden brightening, no dramatic moment at which darkness becomes light. It is a slow gradient, a leaking of pale color into the eastern sky that takes a long time before it results in anything you would call day. I have watched it from outside the habitat in the cold, suited up and sitting on a flat rock with my boots in the dust, watching the sky change, and even knowing exactly what was happening and why. I found it beautiful in the way that slow things are beautiful, in the way that reveals itself not to the impatient eye, but to the one that is willing to watch long enough to see the change happen. There is a particular shade that appears for just a few minutes after the sun has cleared the horizon, when the light is catching the dust at an angle that makes the whole sky glow a dusty gold pink, and the rocks and the plains and the distant crater rim all go that color too. Everything unified in the same warm, improbable tone. I have a photograph of it on my tablet. I look at it sometimes when I am eating, when the habitat feels small and the work feels slow, and the distance from everything I know feels like a weight rather than a freedom. I look at it and I remember that I am in the most beautiful place I have ever been, and that the beauty is real even when I am too tired or too lonely to feel it. The loneliness comes in waves, like weather. I have learned to recognize when a wave is coming and to hold on, not fighting it, but also not being swept under. It comes most often in the early evenings, in the hour after the workday is done, and before sleep is close enough to be a comfort. There's a gap there, a space that on Earth would be filled with other people, with the noise and warmth of other human beings. And here there is nothing to fill it but the hum of the habitat and the readings on the instruments and the small rituals I have developed to give the evening a shape. I make tea. This sounds too simple to matter and matters more than almost anything. I heat the water and wait for it to boil, which takes longer here because the pressure inside the habitat, while Earth normal, feels different somehow. And I make the tea and I hold the cup in both hands and I drink it slowly, letting the warmth move through me. And for those minutes, I am doing something that human beings have been doing for thousands of years. Something so ordinary that no one thinks twice about it, and the ordinariness of it connects me to everything I came from in a way that nothing extraordinary can. I read in the evenings too. Not scientific papers, not in the evenings. Novels. Long ones, preferably. Ones with large casts of characters and plots that move slowly through time and places that feel specific and inhabited. I have several hundred books stored on my tablet, enough to read for years, and I choose them as carefully as I choose anything here, trying to match the book to the mood, trying to find the one that will give me exactly the companionship the evening requires. Last night I read about a family in 19th century Russia. The snow outside their windows and the candlelight inside, and the elaborate social rituals and the arguments about meaning and God and history that went on for pages in warm rooms, while the cold pressed at the glass outside. I read it for 2 hours, and when I put the tablet down, I felt, strange as it sounds, not lonely, but accompanied. As if those characters had been real, and the time I spent with them had been real, and I was not after all alone on a planet 50 million miles from Earth, but simply in another room, in another kind of quiet, reading about people who were as lost in their own particular circumstances as I am in mine. The facility that great writing has for making you feel less alone, even across centuries and conditions that share nothing except the basic human experience of being uncertain and impermanent. That facility has been one of the great gifts of this mission. I had always liked books. I had not known, before I came here, how much I needed them. I am drifting now. I can feel it. The thoughts are becoming less linear, more associative. moving the way thoughts move just before sleep takes them, in slow loops that double back on themselves and dissolve before they complete. This is good. This is exactly right. Let me tell you one more thing before I go. Earlier tonight, before I came to bed, I sat at the small table in the habitat and I looked at the Earth through the telescope. It is not always visible, depending on where Mars and Earth are in their respective orbits. But tonight, it was there, low on the western horizon, a blue-white point of light brighter than any star, with a faint but unmistakable tint of color that no star has, the color of water and cloud and atmosphere, the color of life as seen from far away. I looked at it for a long time, not with any particular feeling, not sadness or longing, not pride or relief, just looking, acknowledging it, letting it be what it was, a small blue point of light in a sky full of points of light, distinct from the rest only in that it is the one I came from, the one where everyone I love is sleeping or waking right now, the one where the air is thick and the water falls as rain and the sky is never the same color 2 days in a row. And then I put down the telescope and I made my tea and I did my evening routines and I came to bed. And now I am here, in the dark, on Mars, 50 million miles from that blue point of light. And I am warm, and I am breathing, and the stars outside my window are burning steady and cold, and the thin wind is whispering against the hull, and Phobos is moving west to east across a sky I cannot see. And I am, without having expected it, without having known it was possible, content. Sleep is very close now. I can feel the edges of it moving in. The way the sounds of the habitat are becoming softer, less distinct. The hum of the heating system becoming less a mechanical sound and more simply a quality of the air. The faint glow of the instruments at the edge of my vision becoming less specific, more like light in general. The ambient luminescence of a room in which someone has been alive and working, and is now letting everything settle. Outside, the dust is still falling from the air, particle by particle in the dark. The temperature is still -60. The stars are still burning cold and steady. Olympus Mons is a shape against the sky that I cannot see but know is there, vast and patient and utterly indifferent, the way old mountains everywhere are utterly indifferent. And I am here. I am a small and temporary thing in a very large and very old place. And right now that is not a frightening thought. Right now that is the most restful thought I have ever had. The smallness of me in all of this. The way the planet does not need me to be here, and I am here anyway, by choice, by the accumulated work of countless minds and hands, by the particular sequence of decisions and desires and circumstances that put a human being in this bunk on this night with this small, scratched window and these stars. I am going to sleep now. The dust will settle while I sleep, and the stars will wheel overhead on their ancient schedules, and Phobos will rise and set and rise again before morning. And at some point, the sky to the east will begin its slow gradient from black to pale green-blue to the first suggestion of salmon pink, and the surface of the planet will go from invisible to real again, rock by rock, dust by dust, crater rim by crater rim, and a new Martian day will begin. But that is later. That is morning. Right now it is night, and the night is long and dark and full of stars, and I am warm, and I am breathing, and I am, against all reasonable expectation, exactly where I want to be. Good night, dear listener. Good night from Mars. Sleep well wherever you are, whatever world you are sleeping on tonight. The dark is kind. The stars are patient. The distance between where you are and where you wish you were is, in the scale of what is actually out there, very small indeed. Let that be a comfort. Let that carry you out. Sleep now. Sleep.